loyalty to your company being a virtue and like your coworkers being more of a liability. I think that's hard. Like we're taught to go to HR, not to each other.
Hi, I'm Lars Gallion.
And I'm Aparna. Welcome to the Circle Back Club. This is the podcast for anybody who's ever suspected that the problem is not us. We name what's broken at work, back it up with receipts, and build real power with people who are done performing. No productivity hacks, no brand advice, just an honest analysis and a community ready to change the status quo.
Yeah, we're here to reimagine and rebuild workplaces to strengthen communities instead of depleting them, to see your coworker as your comrade, not your competition, and to stand up for the dignity and care of all humans and this beautiful planet together. And there's a lot of different ways that we get to talk about that. Today, we're going to focus on the social contract that we agree to being in white collar work. And of course, what do we want to do about it? What do we want to change? This social contract is all of the implicit and explicit behaviors we engage in with our coworkers. Some are conscious, some are not. And somehow all of them become purposeful expectations from the company. And one way or the other, it's truly something that we're navigating. So in this episode, what we're going to do is name some of these behaviors, talk about who gets to create them, who gets to enforce them, and get into the impact that these unwritten rules have on our well-being and our capacity to relate and be in community with other people. So let's renegotiate, shall we?
Let's do it.
We're really lucky to be joined by our friend Leilani Lewis today. Welcome, Leilani, to the club.
Thank you, Lars and Aparna, for having me.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. Leilani is an award-winning arts leader, a writer, and a seasoned diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner based in Seattle. She is also an incredibly important part of our podcast creation, from our name to our episode format, our season 1 arc, literally everything. So it's really, really special to have you as a guest on this show. And yeah, just thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
So I was thinking we can warm up a little bit before we go into social contracts at work and ask you to, is there a social contract in your social life, your personal life that you want to change?
So many, so many. But I think that the one that I see, or at least at work that I remember, and even maybe sometimes socially, is that sometimes as a person who identifies as a woman or in this role, I'm kind of like have to be the organizer, secretary, note taker, person who, cleans house. And often I do it to myself. I raise the hand. But the implicit is that, you get looked at as the responsible party or for those types of parts of the job or the role in your friend group or something. So I'm pretty over it, pretty over that.
Okay, she's not organizing anything anymore.
No.
She's just done. Okay, I'm going to build on that. The implicit social contract in my marriage is that I am the cook and the grocery shopper. And I have been trying so hard to change this. And whenever I ask my husband, I'm like, oh, well, do you want to get groceries? Of course, he'll say yes. And he'll ask me for all the items that are needed. But other than buying himself creamer and grapes, those are the two things he buys for himself. He doesn't buy any other food, and every single day it's like, hey, what are we having for dinner? And one of these days, it's going to be a chunk of him that we're having for dinner. That's what's up.
I'm sorry, cream and grapes.
That's it. That's what because he likes a very specific creamer for his coffee and he loves these big green grapes. And those are the two things he stops at the grocery store for.
And all social contracts can be renegotiated. So
correct.
We got it. I think for me, it's kind of a deep one, but that's just who I am in general, is I want to be in more potential conflict in my relationships, which probably comes off weird, but I was socialized to see my value as being able to keep the peace. And I really want to say things sooner, be a little bit messier, and root in myself a little bit more in my personal relationships. So that's what I'm working on.
Amazing.
Well, let's talk about these contracts at work. As I said in the onset here, right, some of these social contracts are conscious, some are not. Ultimately, they all have a big impact on how we experience ourselves and how we connect to other people at work. So let's break this down a little bit. What makes it social? It's social because it's often not written into a policy or in your onboarding documentation when you join the company. Sometimes they are, or end up in a policy after they've been socialized. But for the most part, we're talking about the implicit realm of ways we're expected to show up and behave at work. And just a really quick nerd side quest. Org psychologists would use this language of social contracts being your psychological contracts. And so there's a lot of research on breaching psychological contracts. And they would actually look at that next to this idea of, are you an ethical leader or not? And ethical leadership created the pathway for what we know today as corporate social responsibility. And I think what's interesting about this and why I'm bringing it up is that when we initially were studying the idea of ethics at work, it started with the leader, it started with the individual person. And then it turned into a CSR, a corporate social responsibility program. Is the corporation ethical? Is the corporation moral? And I think it breaks down the fact that companies are not this ambiguous thing that just exists. They're literally, we are a group of people making decisions together. Leaders are people, shareholders are people. And not shocking, but indeed was studied that an Oxford study found that the leader and the top management must be ethical to co-create an ethical tone in an organization. Which obviously, right? Like, I mean, but an entire study said, yes, indeed, not just the leader sets the tone, but they need to be moral to influence the ethical standards. And I think we're seeing this in like the realm of AI, of depending on the ethics and morality of the leader, that becomes the ethics and morality of the corporation. So pull me back if I'm going too far, but it's a whole world. It's a whole world.
Well, I don't know about the two of you, but I have become super deeply obsessed with watching these TikTok reels or Instagram reels where creators are pulling videos of what these AI CEOs say out loud at conferences and summits and what have you. And in particular, I've just been like really deep on the Sam Altman train. And he was at a summit in India a couple of weeks ago. And somebody, I think asked a question around, what about like the energy consumption of AI? And the man gave the most unhinged response, which the crowd was like laughing and clapping to. And his response was like, well, what does it cost energy wise to get a human being, to become smart? It's like 20 years of like feeding them and housing them and what have you. And he basically is like, well, and if you compare that to AI, right, we already have energy efficiencies. And I just like, for me, it's like such a morally bankrupt response. It's such a morally bankrupt response to suggest that feeding and caring for human beings is, positioned on the same plane as the energy consumption of these AI models, much of which is being used to generate CSAM and like pornography. And then 2 weeks later, there's a scuffle with the Department of War, which I can't even get. Like that also, like that the choice of that name also feels morally and ethically problematic. OpenAI leaned in to this contract because Anthropic wanted to have guardrails and not have the Department of War using AI models to, surveil American citizens. And so, yeah, I mean, like the study, like you can see it playing out in broad daylight in this moment every single day. There's an example that speaks to this.
Yeah, I think that, there's that translation. It's something a partner you said about losing a piece of humanity in that idea. So somehow compliance, like, did we follow policy? I'm not sure about where how they're defining morality is, did we cause harm to people, to humans, or are we compliant with something? Is it ethical because we are compliant, or is it ethical or moral because did we cause harm to people? And I don't know that their criteria or how they're defining these terms in corporate space, and for their leaders either. Like, where's their threshold? And it's usually nowhere near, where humane treatment of people, or what is going to be good for our consumers, or the people who use our products, etc.
My brain just kind of went like, because I feel like if the way that I spoke to my friends caused them to develop an autoimmune disease, they would cease to be my friend.
Right.
But that is not considered necessarily harmful for a corporation, right? Like if going to work at a place leads you to you having like severe heart disease, it's not the corporation that's causing harm. It's like you probably eating too many hamburgers.
Right.
Even though there is probably a really direct relationship between work and the physiological issues so that just popped up into my head. But I don't want to, distract us from the conversation of social contracts.
I took us on this path, and I think, Leilani, your question is spot on of like, is ethics based off of our compliance? And is that enough? We know it's not. And we know compliance is renegotiated all the time. Policies are renegotiated all the time. All of us have written policies for corporations. So,
Yeah.
and that's why, I mean, getting to the other side, so defining social and what contract means in this, are these expected behaviors or enforced norms that we just adopt. And I'm going to just list off a handful and just see how you feel as I say it. So these contracts could be your communication style, communication method, how long you stay in the office, FaceTime, how long you eat lunch, where you eat lunch, when you take breaks, alcohol consumption, knowledge hoarding versus dissemination, mentorship. Who do you mentor? Who mentors you? Who are you sponsoring? Do you talk about people when they're not in the room? Are they talking about you? Language, tone, pace of work, your clothes, specific group dynamics informed by level, team, identity, location, accepted forms of humor, competition, urgency, quantity over quality, conflict avoidance, gaslighting. Okay, I'm going to stop because it's too much and it gets ouchy. But the point is that it's everything that feels like an expectation. And it might feel like an expectation because it's been told to you by someone who has some form of influence relative to who you are. So if you're thinking about their seniority, social position, their identity compared to the majority identity in the corporation, perhaps it's knowledge-based power, someone who is informing you on how to be accepted. And most importantly for corporate workers, social contracts are informing you on how you can advance, how you can have job security, how you can be valuable. Everybody is an AI expert now.
Not me.
LOL.
I am not claiming. Leilani, are you AI expert? We're not claiming.
I barely know Instagram. Remember when I had problems with Instagram? Just
That. One thing as you started naming those things, I had like the most visceral reaction of running up against the norms and learning the hard way that I was not in compliance with the norms, right? It's like when you touch something hot and you get burnt and you're like, oh yeah, I shouldn't touch hot things because I can get burned. It's from getting burnt. Yeah. Woof.
I mean, I'm with you. I mean, you learn them quickly by either getting corrected, and sometimes you're not corrected. You're just sort of ushered into, you feel less and less of a sense of belonging. But just like we all, social contracts and many contracts govern our lives, these implicit contracts, just as we all agree that red means stop and green means go. That's an agreement that we all make to maintain equanimity. I think that keeping the peace at work, this is, these implicit, agreements we all come to. and that creates that peace or that equanimity for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it's easier for managers, easier for HR. Somebody's benefiting from all of us sort of agreeing, and there's only one position, and there's 100 of you that want it. So the best compliant of these agreements gets that space. Whoever performs this well. But in my experience, and I think of what I've observed, is that over my 15 years, these implicit and explicit values, what's seen on the wall, the DEI statements, the value statements, the things that are said by leaders and people that either uphold social contract absolutely, or model social contract, or turn a blind eye to certain behaviors as a way of allowing certain types of things to happen, and seeing the sort of distance and dissonance of these explicit and implicit it's exhausting. I mean, it's exhausting to continue to perform, to see these things come out in words and not be seen in action. I think navigating both simultaneously is usually exhausting for a lot of people in the workspace context.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing us exactly into the why of why we talk about social contracts. And coming back to the purpose of this podcast is to help white collar workers see their environment through the lens that pulls you out of I'm in an individual survival mode or individual experience to it's a collective experience. And we're becoming so curious about how the people around you are experiencing work that you then do something about that care. You take action to change working conditions or changing the parts that, to your point, take away different parts of our humanity for the sake of compliance. Being responsible and responsive witness to harm. And in order to do that, we have to talk to each other about these norms. We literally just have to talk to each other about what social contracts are you engaging in? Which ones do you want? Which ones do you want to keep? They're fun to really make fun of. And to both your points, as we're stepping into this conversation, we have power to change them too. We get to say no to them. So I want to bring us in to actually reading a screenshot of an email that someone named Eric F. received at work.
Do you want me to do it?
And
because this.
do you want to read it, Aparna?
Okay, Leilani. So this post made its way through like a dozen Reddit subthreads that I'm on. I saw it in the anti-work subthread, the job subreddit. And okay, so the title of the email is a new optimization opportunity. And it's written to a guy named Eric from his boss, Brenda. And it says, "Hi, Eric. Welcome again to the team. It's been great having you on board these last 3 weeks. I wanted to reach out regarding a small observation I've made during your lunch breaks. I've noticed that after you've finished eating your sandwich," so I know Eric is white probably. "After you've finished eating your sandwich, you've been spending the remainder of your 30 minutes sitting at your break table and looking at your phone. Yes, you are on your break and not abusing the slotted time, but the optics of taking your full lunch break instead of showing an eagerness to get back to support your work family is frankly disappointing. Most of the team finishes their lunch in about 5 to 10 minutes and probably has like gastro issues and heads back out to support their coworkers immediately. Let's correct this behavior and try to be more mindful of that, quote, team first spirit, so we can keep your momentum going in the right direction. Smiley face, not emoji. Brenda."
Oh my. Oh, wow. He swore fealty to this company and the family. And he is disloyal.
Most people only take 5 to 10 minutes to scarf down. I mean, what are they eating for lunch? Like a liquid lunch?
I mean, that is wow. I'm not surprised that got circulated because I mean, everybody is seeing these things and experiencing it and saying, that's that's the social contract. Like, that's real. That's the real expectation now. These are norms that are becoming tighter and tighter around workers.
And I love that she's like, it's not illegal or wrong for you to take your full 30 minutes, right? But she's nudging him to the norm of their company where apparently they don't eat their food in peace and they just hop right back to work, which I know that for me and like so many other people, it's frowned upon to even like sit and have lunch separately. Usually you just kind of eat in a meeting or you eat while doing something else. And you're not even having a carve out, right? For most white collar workers, like knowledge workers, desk workers, you just eat at your desk.
Right. Right.
It's the gaslighting language that obviously this is a great example of social contracts. Eric is new to the company, so you can manipulate expectations with someone. Obviously, Brenda knows that it's wrong because she references that it's not wrong and then talks about optics. But using the language of you need to do this for your coworkers need you, work family, team first spirit, that part is what gets under my skin so much with this. It's just the way that we can manipulate each other with language of teamwork for the sake of what is just I can't.
It's really awful. And it's so funny because in a
can't.
lot of ways, right, it's a manipulation, but it's also it's a weaponization of loyalty or those relationships that are often false, right? Like they don't actually want us to be in solidarity with our fellow coworker. They don't want us to build real relationships with our coworkers in ways that might compare notes, right? And they don't, like, it doesn't benefit a lot of corporations and companies for us to do that. And yet, this person is saying, go, you got to help your family. And family in itself is also very, fraught, in the corporate space because you're trading labor for money. And that is, there's a lot of problems with this family labeling that, HR should should be flagged on because, you're not. And
She's probably from HR.
and that's not
Brenda sounds like an HR lady.
yeah. Oh, maybe it was
Sorry,
from
Brenda.
HR. And then, but still, it's like there's a lot of problems. There's so many problems with that. That's harmful, but it's also, I bet, so relatable for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who work and
Mhm.
and and want to work or need to work, but deserve also to be treated with a bit of humanity and dignity to eat their damn sandwich for 30 minutes. Well, just for 30 minutes and like that allowed that privilege. Wow. What a wow.
It's a wow. It's a wow. And I think this is contextualizing this already for us. But Leilani, I'm curious from your experience how you've seen the social contract function in the corporation. Like what is it doing?
The social contract is a lot about from what I've experienced, observed, and the people I've worked with, my dear friends who've worked in real proper and big name corporations. The social contract relies on several things. Like it relies on disagreements, like we talked about, red means stop, green means go, and all of that. But all of the nuances in politics rely on first and foremost silence and ultimate agreement. There's no I don't know, like let's take this man who wants the sandwich, Eric G. Eric
S.
F, who wants a sandwich. Now let's take it a step further and say Eric F says, me and Kathy G and Aparna R would like to all eat our sandwiches and take our full 30 minutes. And they all go together. We've compared notes and blah, blah, blah. That would be presumably against that social contract. So now what happens to Eric F? if he breaks that contract, that you're not being ambitious. We value, ambition. In fact, it's a virtue for you to sacrifice your lunch to give us more labor. That is not actually paid, presumably, if you're on salary and you have a lunch break, right? So all of that to me, uh, is it relies on silence and total compliance, right? The minute you say I'm treated differently because of my identity, or I think I'm treating differently because of my identity, that is, that triggers a series of events in most corporations and spaces that tell them or signal to them that you are now outside of social contract. So there are things that happen, and many stories. I have friends who've been ousted from corporations, been overlooked for um, uh, promotions, been demoted, been treated absolutely poorly, been, for a lot of different reasons. But most of them, it's because they didn't perform absolute compliance and they weren't silent. And so your silence, they buy it. Your complicity, absolutely essential. And making sure that you are, yeah, if you perform the best, you advance. And under the social contracts, if you perform the best of their norms. I remember I've been in places where I'm amongst a team, team very gender, racial makeup and other dynamics. And, you know, some of them on the team were able to yell at people. They just were able to yell at people. And as part of it was excused as part of their personality, part of who they were and what they do. So,
And it was probably expected that there would be times where they would
right.
yell.
So
Yeah.
me coming in and I'm like, oh, we're raising our voice here. That's how we do it. We can be really flamboyant. Now I come in, I don't yell very often, just as I don't. But anybody else, might say if they don't pick it up pretty quickly, like I knew I was not. If I yelled like that, not okay. Probably not cool. Based on my
Mhm.
identity, based on my position, based on my tenure, based on a lot of different things. So there's just different ways that these agreements and contracts show up, and they also can be extremely confusing because they apply differently to different people that show up differently.
Yeah, well, I think as I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking that like silence is one of the most conscious and notable of the social contracts in most organizations, that you're not raising your voice to complain. You're not bringing up issues that don't really work for you. You're not doing any of that. Like, you're just kind of humming along. You're not leaving the bad Glassdoor reviews. Right? Like, you're not supposed to be doing that. And just how corrosive silence is in any space, right? Like, be it your family, be it your community, be it the team that you work on. It serves such a corrosive function, but it is the one social contract that I think almost everybody, you know, can agree is expected. Like, that is one.
Yeah, absolutely.
What social contracts do you think we are avoiding naming the most? And why are we avoiding talking about them? I think that that the silence is definitely something that we don't talk about, and there's a lot of context behind that. But I'm curious what comes to mind for you too about the ones that we actively avoid naming or happening.
I could start. Aparna, do you have something off the
Yeah.
tip of your tongue? What?
Well, I just health.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the ways in which our work is hurting our health is one that we're not supposed to talk about. And in our last episode, we spoke with Dr. Dalia Perez, who told the story of women in her organization at Microsoft experiencing perimenopause. But like, you couldn't talk about it. You couldn't talk about it. And I feel like I'm at that age where a lot of my friends are now like having their kids, older millennials, and fertility issues. challenges with not being able to get pregnant easily or autoimmune health issues, where almost every woman I know has some immune health issue that's like flaring up because they're in a pretty toxic work environment. But I think that's one that like we don't talk about the health issues that we're having other than the acceptable health issues, which is like my toddler gave me the flu. Like that's acceptable. But my work stress is causing infertility is not acceptable.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I think also too, there are a few that we avoid naming the most, and the most insidious ones are those that implicate people with power. And I see that more often than not. It is the hardest one to break that social contract for a lot of reasons, even when the harm is very clear. And I've seen people protected, and it is absolutely really insidious. And then the agreement that competence, whiteness, and maleness look like the same thing. Nobody really says, like, people do say that in a lot of spheres. I'm in social justice and social nonprofit spaces, but I think that, you know, it's being enforced every single day. Who gets the interesting projects, who gets, you know, who gets the benefit of the doubt, who's getting promoted, who's on the boards. And a lot of people will work really hard not to name it, but naming it would require a lot of accountability, a lot of people. And then loyalty to your company, and I talked a little bit about this earlier, being a virtue, and loyalty to your your coworkers being more of a liability. I think that's hard. Like, we're taught to go to HR, not to each other. You know, we're told, you know, that, you know, we manage up and not across. And I think that when you atomize, or when you look at it structurally, when you atomize workforce, it's a more compliant workforce. We don't get to build relationships with each other. And I don't think that's an accident. So it's hard to name it when you're in it. I think it's easier when you're outside. But yeah, I think, you know, having nonprofits have their own flavor of this. They do. So mission
They
yeah,
do.
mission-driven orgs, they're like, oh, you know, you care about the cause, like you might accept being underpaid, and being underpaid is part of the deal, right? But it's pretty insidious, because, you know, it weaponizes your values sometimes, you know, against your material needs, and it's really
Well, or you care about the cause, so you're not going to criticize a leader who's making, you know, programmatic choices that are actually not going to create the impact that is in the mission of the organization.
yeah.
And if you are, then you're a rabble rouser, or, you know, you haven't done your time. And I mean, I just remember being like a young person in my 20s working at a nonprofit and having this interaction with a foundation program officer where they, you know, they were going to give us like $150,000, which even 15 years ago was not a lot of money. Right. And they were like, we want you to serve 2,500 students this year. And I said, well, how did you come up with that number? And they were like, well, we think that that's an appropriate number of youth that you should serve in a year. And I said, for $150,000, one FTE and two AmeriCorps, you think we should serve 2,500 young people in this community. How did you get that number? And they couldn't say anything. And I had my wrist slapped, you know, by my mom after that interaction. And I was just like, yo, like, that's, first of all, that's not reasonable. That's not reasonable. Second of all, if they can't justify how they came up with their number, then, like, you know, that's not an acceptable thing. And she said, and she told me that she basically had agreed to the grant terms, and that when it came time to write the report, that like we would just make it up because we needed that funding. And I was like, whoa, like the 25-year-old me just could not, like really struggled with it. And I never did advance in that organization.
And that's, it's not social contract. Like, don't ask, like, we got it. And I'm going to say something really controversial and generalize something that, and I don't even care. I don't, but I do know what I'm saying. I will bet you that if all and a nonprofit world has been, that's a big part of my work experience, that there is one employee in every single nonprofit, especially small and mid-sized nonprofit, who, if they just took one leap and one choice to break a social contract, would sink the whole ship, like with the knowledge that they knew about either finances or their leader, or inappropriate behaviors, or
Yes.
any. I think that happens, and it's so I believe it's everywhere. I think it's like a serious a serious issue that nonprofits are not exempt from that kind of thing. Like, where's the money going? Where's the money going in? Ethics, morality, the stakes are different, the donor dynamics. But in corporate space, it's especially large corporations, you could be one of 40,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 people, and you're dealing with a manager and your team, and to break a social contract, the stakes might be, just for you, high, but you're not going to sink the
Mhm.
whole ship. And I think that's understanding that, and also um that might give you some space to do that sometimes, to break it.
But I
Okay,
wish that it did.
but you think it
But
does?
I
I don't
do
know.
wish that
No,
it
yeah, I
did.
think it might be. Maybe it's not. It's not any safer.
I mean, have you guys read Careless People? Because we've talked about silence, but I think secret
Yeah,
keeping is another it's an implicit social norm, right? Because, of course, by law, we have protections if we want to be whistleblowers. And by law, we have protections if we want to organize our workplace to surface some of these issues and negotiate a different contract, right? Legally, it's like the 30-minute lunch break for Eric. Like legally, supposedly we have these protections, but at big corporations, I'm like, how much corruptness is kept secret by the workers of that corporation? And I think Careless People, right? Like she talks about how Instagram and Meta, like the parent company, knew the psychological harms being experienced by young women and like the rise in societality of young women. And I was like, holy crap, do we not care about our kids? Like, do these ghouls that run these companies really not care about our children? That for making a buck, or like more like 10 billion bucks, they're ready to sell out teenage girls like that?
I think it's a really like the way that you both are talking about this. And I know I was started off in kind of a nerdy place, but there's a parallel here where if you are subscribing to the social contract that the person next to you is a liability and that you are also a liability, like you are
Yeah.
navigating your own internal compliance, there's no world where you can go see the people who are managing your company or the shareholders who are making decisions and place your morality in that, because we're already accepting that in ourselves. Like we've already made that decision in the way that we interact with others. And like, yes, whistleblowing and truth telling can have a really, really big impact depending on the size of the organization. And also doesn't have to be that way. Like we can be able to, there's a world where we can talk to each other about what's going on and it doesn't blow everything up. Like we are in these social conditions and contracts that mean like me saying something is going to blow everything up, but that's not real either. Like we can problem solve together. And obviously, when we're talking about corporations at scale, when you get to a certain size, like these social conditions become kind of untenable. There are other ways. And maybe we can transition our conversation into talking about that other side. what we like and what we want to change.
Mm.
I mean, I have some thoughts about this. I mean, I do, but Aparna, what do you think? What do you want to keep? What do you want to create?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of like the places that I've worked in or, like clients that I've worked for. And okay, when I worked at Teach for India, one of the explicit norms, now many problematic things about that organization, but one thing that I really loved was that everybody in leadership was expected to spend 1 day a month in a low income school, observing, participating, being a full part of the school day where the fellows were being placed. And that yeah, that was just like such an incredible part of my experience of working there is that as a leader, as a director, I was not exempt from like being in community like that. And that was like a 1 day was the mandate. Like you could do more time. And many of us did spend more time in schools. But that was one that I really, yeah, that was one that I really loved. In one of the nonprofits that I worked in Seattle right after grad school, implicit contract was actually eating lunch together and like bringing something to share on a regular basis. There wasn't like a chore chart or anything, but it was just kind of expected that people eat together. You try other people's food, right? You're not just like eating a sandwich in a corner by yourself like a little rat. You're like sharing your food with other people. And I really loved that contract as well. There's another organization that I worked with in construction. And one of their implicit contracts was that you don't jump to the worst possible conclusion about another person. And I saw it play out where in a meeting, an older employee, an older worker, in talking about people of color, he used the language of colored people. And I can see in a lot of scenarios, this person would get written up and like people would have lots of big feelings about this. But at this organization, he wasn't shamed. And one of the managers kind of just gently nudged him and said, "Hey, like the language that we use now is people of color. Let's try and use that." And it was just such great modeling for the 60-year-old man, white man, who's worked in construction his whole life, not gone to college, that he's not bad by virtue of using outdated language. Yeah, so those are some things that I've really enjoyed, but I would say anytime I've worked with or for an organization that models transparency, actually models a vulnerability, like sharing with employees, the financial health of the organization. Yeah, those are things like norms that I want to see propagated.
I love that. I love that. I love that, like, you know, um, bringing people in and like sharing time together. I think that's a big deal. And um, kind of along that same line, I remember, um, being together, like having or seeing each other as human, not just like workers, is so important to keeping us, keeping morale and keeping us a little bit, happier, at least where we are. And it doesn't need to come from the entity that you work for. It can be built with each other, and that's sort of a beautiful thing. But um, one of the work human studies that is from 2023 showed that people who celebrated life milestones showed just, you know, I think it was like much higher. It was like 40 started at 43% happiness in the surveys, and like jumped to 86% when they started implementing their own, like this was worker led, their own celebration sort of protocols. So they were celebrating each other's milestones and celebrating birthdays or doing something, like having that togetherness and seeing others is really, really important. And I'd like that norm. Like I would love to see that for employees and for people who are working and spaces with teams.
That's so beautiful. I actually had a client for many years where they had like an FTE, like a 5 FTE devoted to doing the celebrations. And when they became my client, they told me about that. I was like, wow, what a waste of time. Like, how many times a year are you eating cake? But it was like a well orchestrated celebration situation at this organization, and people really loved it. Yeah.
Celebration. And I want to, like, I think it's not soft work, and to your point to Aparna's, and also calling back to you, Lars, when you talked about early on in in our session, you'd like to engage in disagreement. What I would love, I think the performance of competence has bred so much fear in people that they can't say, "Hey, I need help with this budget," or "This problem is complicated,"
Yeah.
because they're so fearful of showing this vulnerability that they end up doing it not well, and then they end up, there's residual effects of that because of that fear. And as somebody who has said, it's like I reject it. Like I don't want to know everything all the time, all at once, and I don't want to be expected to. But I also don't want to be, people have been shamed for not knowing everything, especially, and I will say this, especially people who identify as women or present as women in female bodies. I want to make sure like people can ask for help and also disagree. I want healthy argument. I want healthy discourse in workspaces where people can do that and everybody walks away whole. And I did DEI for a long time. I'm not into utopian fantasies of, in this realm and work. I don't care for that. I care for like robust, healthy discussion, pushback, interrogating ideas, interrogating the action, like what, making sure that we're doing things that are essential to, in my case, serving people, serving other humans. And in other places, it might be like making the best damn widget. Like, I want to make it. I want to tussle about how to make the widget and make the widget that's going to like rock the people's world for the other, that goes into the other widget, like whatever that is.
It's a nesting widget.
It's a nesting widget that
The
goes
first
to another
nesting
widget that goes into another thing that creates, I don't know, a wheel. Like, I don't know. But, like that doesn't have to be somewhere where I've got to protect my salary. Like, like people can't know how much I make, and people can't tell my boss like I'm having widget issues. Like I don't want that. I want that norm. I want this sort of broken open space. And I feel like there's some world, my fantasy is that there's some world where we can be there can be capitalists and there can be transparency, openness, and workers' rights all in the same bed. But I don't know that they can sleep together. I don't presume to know either, but I do know that I'm veering toward, and I would fight for this world where at least the people get to be human at work. That's my vision anyway.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
May it be so.
May it be so. Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit. We want to do a rapid response round with you, rapid fire section. I have 5 prompts, and I am going to ask Leilani you to go first. You can do it. You can do it. It's not high stakes. Okay. The first prompt is this. You have to finish the sentence. So, the white collar workers' greatest superpower, if they choose to use it, is blank.
Collective legibility. The moment we start talking to each other about what we're actually experiencing, then we break the illusion, and that could be really powerful. Then we can fly together.
Love it. Lars?
Last episode I said verbal influence, and I feel the same. And now I'm going to say something just to be silly, which is a really good presentation, very compelling, very compelling. Let's bring those skills into civic engagement. Let's bring those skills out on the streets, and let's convince some people some stuff because we're good at it.
Yeah. You know what? I actually was thinking the same thing. I was like, We can make amazing decks. Let us fucking arm people with amazing, brilliant decks. Go tell a great story.
Yeah.
Okay, second prompt. What is your favorite corporate phrase? Favorite corporate lingo?
I like, can I tell you the ones I don't like?
Okay,
Because I
fine.
don't like a lot of them.
Okay.
Okay, I'll tell you the ones I like. Okay, I like touch base, and of course I love circle back, but I like touch base because it involves physical touch, or it doesn't
That's
actually.
sweet.
Actually doesn't. It implies it. I'm sorry, it doesn't involve it. Maybe I've been using it wrong this whole
Ding,
time.
ding, 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 ding. HR gets called in.
Yeah,
You
no,
are
it does
not a
not.
liability. You're
Yes.
not a liability.
Do not to actually touch base. But no, yeah, I like touch base.
Lars, favorite?
This week, I'm loving, we're building the plane as we're flying it, you know?
Building the plane as we fly. Okay, third prompt. What is a corporate phrase that white collar workers use that actually mean I'm scared or I'm worried?
There are two that come to mind. One is, well, let's make sure we're set up for success. So I think that like that can mean anything, but I think sometimes it means like let's slow down, let's not
Yeah.
do this thing, like we're moving too fast for me. And then the other one is, which I think is kind of violent, and I don't like it, but I think it means like let's not boil the ocean, or like let's not eat the whole elephant. Both of them kind of violent and odd phrases, but also to me mean like they're overwhelmed by a large body of work or project that signals fear.
Lars?
We need to get some eyes on this. Let's get some eyys on it.
Gotta
That's
get some
fear.
eyes on it.
That's terrifying. Like somebody's terrified if they say
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Okay, here's the fourth one. What's one thing the system never told white collar workers about their own power? What has been withheld from white collar workers about their own power?
So in my opinion, honestly, I think it's that your employer needs you more than you've been conditioned to believe.
Mm.
The whole apparatus, performance management, probation periods, culture fit is designed to make you feel like you're replaceable. I don't think talent is interchangeable, or like relationships are not interchangeable, and institutional knowledge walks out the door. And so you do have more leverage than they want you to know. And so that's the lie.
Yeah. I have one more. Leilani, and this is for you. If you could say one sentence, one thing directly to every white collar worker listening to this right now about what is possible on the other side of breaking or renegotiating social contracts, what would it be?
Run! No, no. Build your own community with your coworkers.
Okay, that is the perfect thing to almost end on. Build your own community with your own coworkers. So we do end every episode with one takeaway each and one thing that you can actually do. Lars, I'm wondering if you're ready to go. What takeaways from this episode, from this conversation?
I think the simplest reflection is, can we normalize talking about social contracts so we can actually start taking accountability for them? We're so good at complaining about work, but what are we saying when we're actually doing that? And, so much of this podcast was talking about what we want to change, what is painful. And yeah, I also recognize that like there's some things we really like. Maybe we like the people, we like the way of working, the purpose. It's important to talk about that too. There's no shame in the social contracts and social conditions that we're experiencing. The system is designed for it. And I think when we get overly focused on competition and performance, we're actually moving into a place of dishonesty because we're not talking to each other about what we're doing, how and what we're accepting is normal. So that means that there's a lot of room for hard to happen. If we're so focused on compliance, we're not going to react and step up for the person who's next to us who needs our help. For Eric F., who needs to just eat his sandwich for 30 minutes. You know, like what Aparna didn't say is when he posted it, his caption was, "So I quit today," right? Something like that.
Yeah.
That shouldn't, we should just say, you know what? No, Brenda, no. So this week, play with talking to your coworker. And you can just, you can ask them, do you see me as your competition? What does that feel like? Are you afraid of retaliation? Are you doing work that you don't understand its impact on the world? How do you perform at work? What does that look like? Just get curious and talk about the conditions together and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Leilani, any takeaways? Any invitations?
There's so many things I can say, but I really do understand that it is a privilege to be able to leave your job.
Yeah.
Even when it's hard and you really, really want to. And all I know and all I really know, and in the spirit of what Lars just said, is that when you have people and you can commiserate with the people that you work with or other people who are working, you at least have some relief. And so at the very least, if you can't leave, you can always be a really good sort of relief to someone else, maybe, or they can be a relief to you. Could stand together, and maybe if they're in your organization, you can tell them how much you're making. They can tell you how much they're making. You guys can start the conversation, get normalized, and being transparent and caring for each other.
I mean, you both know that I love data, and one of the things that is highly correlated to our health is having friends, right? You probably already know this, right? But having friends helps with longevity. Having friends leads to like having fewer diseases. And the same is true at work. Even if you're in a place that feels like a toxic waste pit, they're going to care. And I feel like now in my early 40s, some of my closest friends are people that I was in the trenches with in my 20s. Yeah. I feel like we've had a really, really good conversation. Leilani, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, folks, on our next episode, we are going to talk about the myth of being the ideal or the perfect worker and the material cost that trying to live out this ideal has on other people.
Yes, and Circle Back Club, that is all of you. We want to hear from you. We're collecting stories from your coworkers who are sharing their icks, their hopes for corporate work, your experiences, and they influence the way we tell stories and incorporate your stories into our episodes so we all know that we are not alone. So if you have a story about work you want to share with us, send us an email or audio recording to hello@circleback.club. I'm Lars.
I'm Aparna, and we'll see you next week.